From legitimate companies taking organs and bones from morgues across America, to their executives teaching coroners how to cover their tracks, here's what you need to know about the business of harvesting body parts. You might think that this is something only shady and illegal organizations would do. But the truth is, legitimate companies harvest body parts from morgues all across America. That's right, this is a legit industry we're talking about, and that's mostly because there's a demand for organs all around the world. Usually, when you need an organ transplant, you get put on a waiting list. But in some cases, patients can't delay their surgeries without risking complications. In a perfect world, you wouldn't have to wait that long. But we don't live in a perfect world, do we? The free market often steps in to provide goods and services that people need, especially when more ethical channels fail them. So is this an example of a black market trade going mainstream? Not always. The Biological Resource Center is just one of the many companies profiting off of the organ trade, with the Arizona company convincing at least 5,000 Americans to literally spill their guts out. The thing is, this company wasn't trying to provide transplants. Rather, they needed organs for research. Whether it's to test out medicines or conduct genetic experiments, companies need a steady supply of organs to keep the ball rolling. And there are plenty of other reasons why a corporation might need body parts. Now, just because these companies have a good reason for harvesting organs doesn't make it a victimless activity. On the contrary, there are multiple cases where they impeded potential homicide investigations. Just take a look at what happened to Marietta Jinda. She was 69 years old when she died in September 2016, and police only arrived on the scene after getting repeated calls about possible abuse. When they found her emaciated corpse, it weighed just 70 pounds, so they decided to investigate in case any foul play was involved. It seemed like a textbook case of abuse, but the coroner's office never got a chance to confirm that. You see, by the time the coroner unzipped the body bag, half of Jinda's body had gone missing. All of the bones had been removed from her limbs, not to mention the skin that had been carefully cut off her back. In case you're wondering, this isn't some big mystery, because police officials immediately knew what had happened. Apparently, workers from a tissue procurement company called One Legacy were to blame. They'd accessed the body right before the coroner got to it, but they claimed they didn't know there were any abuse allegations. Some might say they were lying, but the coroner's office made the same claim, saying that police hadn't informed them about the possibility of abuse until 10 days after the victim's death. Now, they were technically able to complete the autopsy, filling in the blanks with hospital records and photos, and they eventually closed the case, stating that Jinda had died of natural causes. However, noted forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht had some doubts about the autopsy report. According to him, there's no way they could have conducted a complete investigation without checking the bones in her limbs. Fractures in her arms or legs would have been essential pieces of evidence. And in Wecht's own words, a potential case of manslaughter just disappeared, all because the folks at One Legacy had to get their tissue samples at any cost. Another case involved 44-year-old David Walters. The victim was reportedly homeless at the time of his death, and he was found on the street with massive head trauma in September 2010. There's a chance that the police themselves were complicit in his death, but once again, One Legacy stepped in and ruined any chances of the truth coming to light. When the coroner started their autopsy, the victim's brain was practically falling apart, depriving investigators of crucial evidence once again. So the deputy medical examiner was forced to conclude that the autopsy was compromised. Walter's cause of death was a sudden stroke, according to his death certificate. But the medical examiner's office said that police involvement couldn't be ruled out. Corrupt officers might have escaped accountability because of One Legacy's interference, and the company's responsible for dozens of such cases across Southern California. But this isn't just an American problem. Tüdingen, a secretive German company, has made billions from harvesting bones from corpses. One of the earliest cases happened on the 5th of August, 2004. When Anatoly Kharkov, a former engineer living in Kyiv, had his corpse desecrated by a Ukrainian company working for Tüdingen. His daughter, Lena Krat, had been coaxed into signing a form that allowed them to remove his skin, and they got her consent by claiming it was for children that needed skin grafts. Krat initially didn't want to sign the forms, but the persistence of the executive coupled with the stress of her father's death, eventually wore her down. However, she had no idea how far the coroner would go. When she was finally allowed to see her father's body, she realized that despite only asking for a skin donation, they'd removed bones, tendons, and cartilage as well. You see, Pseudogen doesn't have much use for skin, but bones and tendons? They're like gold for the German company, because they can sell them across the world for hip and spinal surgeries, along with bone reconstruction. Many of their clients are in the US, and they've paid billions to get their hands on the tissue samples, after Pseudogens sawed and refined them into the right shapes, of course. This raises an important question. How exactly did things get this bad? Well, in Pseudogen's case, the prospect of money was too much to resist. The various parts of a human body can be sold for $250,000, and that's just from one corpse. The tissue industry in America earns about $1 billion a year, so it's easy to see why shadowy corporations would want a slice of the pie. That said, is any of this even legal? Technically speaking, yes it is. While Krat was essentially coerced into signing the consent form, her signature on the dotted line made everything above board, at least in a legal sense, because there's no evidence of coercion, apart from Krat's own statements. What's especially concerning is that these products aren't even necessary. According to the president of the Germany Society of Orthopedics, Klaus-Peter Gunther, the best option is to take tissue samples from the patients themselves. If they can't do that, for some reason, the second best choice is to use samples made from fragments left behind after other surgeries. Of course, necessity isn't the driving force behind this industry. That dubious honor goes to consumer demand. As long as there are buyers for the product, companies like Pseudogen and One Legacy will be more than happy to ransack corpses. The fact that Anatoly Kharkov was Ukrainian is notable because the German company knew that conducting its actions on foreign soil would help maintain secrecy. Again, they're not technically breaking any laws, but here's the thing. Even if they have consent to remove organs, they have to preserve evidence first. Despite that, organ companies like One Legacy clearly know how to bypass regulations, and they have plenty of insiders helping them out. In the case of David Walters, a hospital administrator let One Legacy's employees in to remove his organs. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Get this, coroners are sometimes directly involved, and corporate executives often teach them how to cover their tracks. When the LA Times investigated One Legacy's organ business in Southern California, they learned that the company's executives closely worked with coroners to keep everything under wraps. How did they find this out? When they tried to get autopsy reports for these cases, One Legacy sent representatives that helped coroners deny their requests. An Orange County ME even emailed his colleagues in the area, asking them what language to use to prevent the LA Times from uncovering the truth. An internal leak revealed a vast web of conspiracy, including an email from One Legacy CEO Prasad Garimella telling other procurement offices about the information request. Their network stretches across the globe, and it includes coroners, police, government officials, as well as the corporations themselves, along with several smaller companies that do their dirty work. Corporations like Pseudogen and One Legacy use underhanded tactics to get people to consent, and they almost never give them all of the information before getting their signature. If you want to protect your organs after you sign up for an organ donation, make sure you specify any organs you want to exclude. Remember, bones and tendons are not essential for transplants, so there's nothing wrong with excluding them from your donation. There's no telling whether these companies or their collaborators will be held accountable. But until then, from executives helping coroners keep the whole operation a secret, to the countless examples of them taking tissue samples from morgues across America, this was everything you needed to know about the business of harvesting body parts.